D4vd and the mysterious Tesla stunned investigators when a dismembered body was discovered inside. But new evidence is now shaking the entire timeline of the case. What really happened and when? The suburb had always been calm, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names and children played freely on quiet streets. Mornings were usually filled with the soft hum of cars and birdsong, a sense of routine that made the area feel safe. That sense of safety vanished one morning when a jogger spotted a sleek Tesla parked strangely on the side of a little-used road. At first glance, it seemed like a car left unattended, but something about it didn't sit right. The doors were slightly open, the windows tinted in a way that blocked clear views inside, and a sharp chemical smell hung in the air. The jogger's unease grew into alarm, prompting a call to the authorities. Within minutes, police cordoned off the area, their flashing lights cutting through the early morning stillness, and a crowd of neighbors gathered, drawn by curiosity and fear. Inside the Tesla, the scene was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Layers of plastic, tape, and makeshift coverings concealed a human body. Forensic teams moved carefully, aware that every detail could be critical to solving the case. The body had been dismembered, packed with precision, and treated with chemicals likely to mask odor or slow decomposition. Investigators worked meticulously to document the evidence, understanding that the manner in which the crime was carried out suggested someone with planning, skill, and chilling intent. The identity of the victim remained unknown, leaving a cloud of fear and speculation hanging over the neighborhood. People wondered how a violent act of such precision could happen in a community so seemingly ordinary, and whether the perpetrator might strike again. As news of the discovery spread, media outlets quickly descended on the scene, broadcasting images of the Tesla, the police perimeter, and the shocked residents. Social media erupted with theories, some plausible, many far-fetched, all centered around the shocking reality of the crime. Investigators sifted through surveillance footage from nearby streets, examined phone and GPS records, and interviewed neighbors, trying to piece together the movements of the vehicle and anyone connected to it. The urgency was clear. The longer the case went unsolved, the greater the risk of the perpetrator acting again. The Tesla itself became a critical piece of evidence. Investigators knew its digital system's GPS data, timestamps, and onboard records could provide the timeline needed to understand what happened. As the investigation unfolded, the suburb transformed from a picture of normalcy to a crime scene steeped in fear and mystery. The discovery of the dismembered body in a luxury car marked the beginning of an investigation that would reveal a level of planning and deception no one had anticipated, leaving the community shaken and desperate for answers. The investigation began in earnest, with law enforcement poring over every detail of the Tesla and its surroundings. Detectives focused on reconstructing the movements of the vehicle in the days leading up to the discovery. Surveillance cameras from nearby streets, businesses, and traffic lights were collected and reviewed frame by frame, revealing glimpses of the car moving at unusual hours, sometimes alone, sometimes accompanied by unknown individuals. Phone records, GPS data, and digital footprints became crucial pieces of the puzzle. Investigators were determined to establish a timeline, but the precision with which the crime had been executed made the task incredibly challenging. Every clue seemed to raise more questions than answers, leaving authorities frustrated yet determined to uncover the truth. Forensic experts examined the car meticulously. Fibers, fingerprints, and trace materials were collected, each sample potentially holding information about the perpetrator. The chemical residue inside the Tesla suggested someone with knowledge of how to delay decomposition, indicating careful planning rather than a crime of impulse. Investigators theorized that the suspect had prepared in advance, choosing the car and the location strategically to minimize detection. Even the dismemberment appeared methodical, executed in a way that left little immediate evidence. It was clear that the person behind the crime had a calculated approach, someone who understood the risks and took steps to cover their tracks. As authorities pieced together the digital and physical evidence, a suspect profile began to emerge. The individual was likely familiar with vehicles, perhaps even with technical systems like the Tesla's onboard computers. They displayed patience and foresight, traits that made the investigation more complicated, as the usual leads and eyewitness accounts were scarce or unreliable. Financial records and purchase histories became a focus, as investigators searched for anyone who had acquired unusual tools or materials around the time the crime was believed to have occurred. The community remained on edge as details slowly emerged. Local residents were interviewed repeatedly, providing fragments of information that could help map the Tesla's movements. Witnesses described seeing the car in unusual places and at strange hours, raising suspicions that it had been used to transport the victim over long distances. Despite the mounting pressure, the investigation seemed to stall at times, the complexity of the crime defying simple explanations. Yet every piece of evidence brought authorities closer to understanding the method behind the madness, slowly revealing the chilling extent of premeditation and cunning involved in the case. The more detectives uncovered, the more they realized that the Tesla was more than just a crime scene. It was a tool in a calculated plan. Reconstructing its path, analyzing its data, and understanding the suspect's methods became central to the investigation, promising to reveal not only who was responsible, but how such a calculated crime had been executed under the radar in a seemingly peaceful community. Weeks into the investigation, a breakthrough sent shockwaves through the police department. Forensic analysts discovered traces of DNA in a hidden compartment of the Tesla that did not match the initial victim. This revelation suggested the vehicle had been involved in more than one crime, raising the chilling possibility that the perpetrator had used it repeatedly. The discovery forced investigators to re-examine every piece of evidence, questioning previous assumptions and revisiting witness statements. If the Tesla had been involved in multiple incidents, the timeline of events was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Every movement, every digital log, and every fragment of physical evidence suddenly took on new significance, revealing a pattern of careful manipulation designed to mislead investigators. As investigators dug deeper, a time-stamped audio recording stored within the Tesla's system emerged as a critical clue. The recording suggested that the body had been placed inside the vehicle earlier than initially believed, contradicting prior estimates and forcing authorities to reconstruct the timeline from scratch. Experts speculated that the perpetrator had returned to the car multiple times, possibly to move the body, tamper with evidence, or check that nothing had been discovered. This methodical behavior indicated a level of foresight that went beyond ordinary criminal planning, painting a picture of someone who was not only meticulous but also dangerously patient. The discovery of additional DNA and the audio recording prompted investigators to broaden their search for potential victims. Cold cases and missing person reports from surrounding areas were reviewed, and patterns of vehicle movements were cross-referenced with these incidents. Every fragment of data, from GPS coordinates to timestamps on digital devices, was scrutinized for connections that could point to the perpetrator's wider activities. The realization that the Tesla had been more than a single-use crime scene added urgency to the investigation. Authorities understood that they were dealing with a suspect who had learned how to exploit gaps in the system, someone capable of evading detection while committing repeated acts of violence. The revelation also changed the focus of the investigation from simply identifying the victim to understanding the full extent of the perpetrator's behavior. Each discovery exposed the chilling reality that this was not an isolated act, but part of a calculated series of crimes. Forensic teams and detectives worked tirelessly to map every possible interaction, every movement of the Tesla, and every connection the suspect could have had. The new evidence shattered the initial timeline, forcing investigators to question not only what had happened, but how much more could have gone unnoticed. The case had become a complex puzzle, and every piece revealed deeper layers of planning, deception, and danger, leaving authorities and the community alike unsettled and desperate for answers. As the investigation progressed, the new evidence began to point toward a suspect who had remained largely invisible until now. Authorities identified an individual with access to Tesla vehicles, someone whose background suggested familiarity with high-tech systems and who had a history of criminal behavior. The suspect's pattern of disappearing for days at a time coincided with the timeline reconstructed from the Tesla's GPS data, hinting that these absences were not random but part of a calculated routine. Detectives also uncovered financial records showing purchases of tools and chemicals consistent with dismemberment and evidence tampering, confirming suspicions that the crime had been meticulously planned. Investigators worked to trace the suspect's movements, mapping out every location visited and every digital footprint left behind. Phone records, online activity, and credit card transactions provided a clearer picture of the suspect's life, revealing a level of organization that had initially made detection difficult. Authorities discovered that the individual had deliberately manipulated the timeline by altering vehicle logs, using untraceable communication channels, and carefully choosing when and where to move the body. Each discovery reinforced the understanding that the suspect was highly methodical, someone who had thought through every step to avoid leaving obvious clues. Local residents remained anxious as the investigation intensified. The realization that the suspect had been moving through the community undetected for weeks or perhaps months shattered the sense of safety the neighborhood once had. Investigators revisited witness statements, asking residents to recall any unusual sightings or interactions that had previously seemed insignificant. Small details, a fleeting glance of a Tesla at odd hours, a suspicious individual near isolated streets suddenly became critical pieces of the puzzle. The police pieced together these fragments, gradually constructing a profile of a suspect who was intelligent, calculating, and willing to take extreme measures to conceal their actions. Authorities also began exploring the possibility that the suspect had more victims, cross-referencing unsolved cases in the region with the Tesla's movements. Evidence suggested that the vehicle may have been used repeatedly, with the body discovered being just one instance of a larger, more disturbing pattern. The magnitude of this possibility added pressure to the investigation as detectives raced to prevent any further crimes. Every new detail, no matter how small, became a vital part of the effort to understand the suspect's methods, motives, and the full extent of their actions. The community, once in disbelief, now watched anxiously as law enforcement honed in on a figure who had managed to blend into everyday life while executing a terrifying plan with precision. The final breakthrough in the investigation came when forensic analysts and digital experts combined their findings, completely rewriting the case timeline. By analyzing GPS coordinates, timestamps from the Tesla's onboard systems, and subtle digital traces from the vehicle's internal network, investigators discovered that the body had been placed inside the car days earlier than initially believed. This contradicted witness statements and previous estimates, exposing flaws in the original reconstruction of events. The revelation forced detectives to revisit every aspect of the case, from the suspect's movements to the evidence collected at the scene, revealing a level of manipulation and planning that was staggering. With the new timeline in place, authorities realized that the suspect had returned to the Tesla multiple times, moving and adjusting evidence to create confusion. Every step appeared deliberate, designed to mislead investigators and obscure the true sequence of events. Forensic teams re-examined trace materials, fibers, and DNA evidence with this new understanding, uncovering connections that had been overlooked. The case, initially believed to be a single incident, now pointed to a chilling pattern of premeditated activity. It became clear that the suspect's meticulous approach had allowed them to control the narrative, creating a false sense of timing and opportunity that delayed detection. Investigators widened their search, revisiting unsolved missing person cases, re-interviewing witnesses, and cross-referencing data from nearby surveillance systems. Each discovery added context to the suspect's movements, confirming that the timeline they had constructed was only part of a larger picture. The sophistication of the planning suggested not only technical knowledge but also psychological calculation and understanding of how to manipulate both evidence and perception to evade capture. Authorities recognized that the Tesla had not merely been a crime scene. It had been a tool in an intricate plan that reflected careful forethought and a chilling disregard for human life. When the suspect was finally apprehended, the authorities were able to piece together the full sequence of events, revealing a methodical and deliberate series of actions that had unfolded over weeks. The community, shaken by the case from the beginning, now faced the reality that the crime had been far more complex than anyone had imagined. The shattered timeline not only solved critical questions, but also highlighted the dangers of relying solely on initial assumptions. The investigation became a landmark case, studied for how digital evidence and forensic analysis could uncover hidden truths. By the end, the chilling revelations left both law enforcement and the public with a sobering understanding. A single luxury car had been the center of a meticulously orchestrated crime, and it had taken every available tool to finally reveal the full story behind the dismembered body in the Tesla.